Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. We'd like to welcome everyone to our weekly Krishna book reading to Srila Prabhupada. And as always, we'd like to offer our respectful obeisances to Srila Prabhupada and to each other. Namo Om Vishnuvadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti-Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravane Pacharane Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paskacha Deshatarane. And to each other, Vanchakalpadurubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patita Nam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, Srila Prabhupada, we're starting with chapter 21 today, entitled, The Gopis Attracted by the Flute. With the arrival of the beautiful autumn season, the waters in the lakes and rivers became as clear as crystal and filled with fragrant lotus flowers, and breezes blew very pleasantly. At that time, Krishna entered the forest of Vrindavan with the cows and the cowherd boys. Krishna was very much pleased with the atmosphere of the forest, where flowers bloomed and bees and drones hummed very jubilantly, while the birds, trees, and plants were all looking very happy. Krishna, tending the cows and accompanied by Sri Balaram and the cowherd boys, began to vibrate his transcendental flute. After hearing the vibration of the flute of Krishna, the gopis in Vrindavan remembered him and began to talk amongst themselves about how nicely Krishna was playing his flute. When the gopis were describing the sweet vibration of Krishna's flute, they also remembered their pastimes with him. Thus, their minds became disturbed, and they were unable to describe completely the beautiful vibration. While discussing the transcendental vibration, they remembered also how Krishna dressed, decorated with a peacock feather on his head, just like a dancing actor, and with blue flowers pushed over his ear. His garment glowed yellow gold, and he was garlanded with a Vaijayanti necklace. Dressed in such an attractive way, Krishna filled up the holes of his flute with the nectar emanating from his lips. So they remembered him entering the forest of Vrindavan, which is always glorified by the footprints of Krishna and his companions.
Krishna was very expert in playing the flute. The gopis were captivated by the sound vibration, which was attractive not only to them but to all the living creatures who heard it. One of the gopis told her friend, "The highest perfection of the eyes is to see Krishna and Balaram entering the forest and playing their flute and tending the cows with their friends." Persons who are constantly engaged in transcendental meditation of seeing Krishna, internal and external, by thinking of him, playing the flute, entering the Vrindavan forest, and tending the cows with the cowherd boys, have really attained the perfection of samadhi. Samadhi trance means observation of all activities of the senses in a particular object, and the gopis indicated that the pastime of Krishna were perfection of all meditation and samadhi. It is confirmed in Bhagavad-Gita that anyone who is always absorbed in thought of Krishna is the topmost of all yogis.
Another gopi expressed her opinion that Krishna and Balarama, while tending the cows with the cowherd boys, appeared just like actors going to play on a dramatic stage. Krishna was dressed in glowing garments of yellow, Balarama in blue, and they held new twigs of mango tree, peacock feathers, and bunches of flowers in their hands, dressed with garlands of lotus flowers. They were sometimes singing very sweetly among their friends. One gopi told her friends, "How is it Krishna and Balarama are looking so beautiful?" Another gopi said, "My dear friends, we cannot even think of his bamboo flute. What sort of pious activities did it execute so that it is now enjoying the nectar of the lips of the Krishna, which is actually the property of us gopis. Krishna sometimes kisses the gopis, therefore the transcendental nectar of his lips is available only to them." So the gopis asked, "How is it possible that the flute, which is nothing but a bamboo rod, is always engaged in enjoying the nectar from Krishna's lips?" Because the flute is engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord. The mother and the father of the flute must be happy.
The lakes and the rivers are considered to be the mothers of the trees because the trees live simply by drinking water. So the waters of the lakes and rivers of Vrindavan were in a happy mood, full of blooming lotus flowers, because the waters were thinking, "How is that our son, the bamboo rod, is enjoying the nectar of Krishna's lips?" The bamboo trees standing by the banks of the rivers and the lakes were also happy to see their descendants so engaged in the service of the Lord. Just as the person who are advanced in transcendental knowledge take pleasure in seeing their descendants engaged in the service of the Lord. The trees were overwhelmed with joy and were incessantly yielding honey, which flowed from the beehives hanging on their branches.
Another gopi spoke thus to her friend about Krishna. "Dear friend, our Vrindavan is proclaiming the glories of their entire earth because this planet is glorified by the lotus footprint of the son of Devaki. Beside when Govinda play his flute, the peacock immediately become mad. As
No, you have to hold the mic to your
as if they had heard the rumbling of a new cloud, when all the animals and trees and plants either on the top of Govardhan hill or in the valley see the dancing of the peacock. They all stand still and listen to the transcendental sound of the flute. With great attention, we think that the boon is not possible or available on any other planet. Although the gopi were village cowherd women and girls, they had extensively Vedic knowledge. Such is the fact of Vedic civilization. People in general would learn the highest truth of the Vedic simply by hearing from authoritative source.
Another gopi said, "My dear friends, just see the deer. Although they are dumb animals, they have approached the son of Maharaj Nanda, Krishna. Not only are they attracted by the dress of Krishna and Balram, but as soon as they hear the playing of the flute, the deer, along with their husbands, offer respectful obeisances unto the Lord by looking at him with great affection. The gopis were envious of the deer because the deer were able to offer their service to Krishna along with their husbands. The gopis thought themselves not so fortunate because whenever they wanted to go to Krishna, their husbands were not very happy."
Another gopi said, "My dear friends, Krishna is so nicely dressed that he appears to be the impetus to various kinds of ceremonies held by the women folk. Even the wives of the denizens of heaven become attracted after hearing the transcendental sound of his flute. Although they are traveling in the air in their airplanes, enjoying the company of their husbands, on hearing the sound of Krishna's flute, they immediately become perturbed. Their hair is loosened and their tight belts are slackened. This means that the transcendental sound of the flute of Krishna extended to all corners of the universe. Also, it is significant that the gopis knew about the different kinds of airplanes flying in the sky.
Another gopi said to her friends, "My dear friends, the cows are also charmed as soon as they hear the transcendental sound of the flute of Krishna. It sounds to them like the pouring of nectar, and they immediately spread their long ears just to catch the liquid nectar of the flute. As for the calves, they are seen with the nipples of their mothers pressed in their mouths, but they cannot suck the milk. They remain struck with devotion, and tears glide down from their eyes, illustrating vividly how they are embracing Krishna heart to heart. These phenomena indicate that even the cows and calves in Vrindavan knew how to cry for Krishna and embrace him heart to heart. Actually, the perfection of Krishna consciousness can be culminated in the shedding of tears from the eyes."
Another young gopi told her mother, "My dear mother, the birds who are all looking at Krishna playing on his flute are sitting very attentively on the branches and twigs of different trees. From their features, it appears that they have forgotten everything and are engaged only in hearing Krishna's flute. This proves that they are not ordinary birds. They are great sages and devotees, and just to hear Krishna's flute, they have appeared in Vrindavan forest as birds. Great sages and scholars are interested in Vedic knowledge, but the essence of Vedic knowledge is stated in the Bhagavad-Gita, Vedescha sarver aham eva vidya. Through the knowledge of the Vedas, Krishna has to be understood. From the behavior of these birds, it appeared that they were great scholars in Vedic knowledge, and that they took to Krishna's transcendental vibration and rejected all branches of Vedic knowledge. Even the river Jamuna, very much desiring to embrace the lotus feet of Krishna, after hearing the transcendental vibration of his flute, broke her fierce waves to flow very nicely with lotus flowers in her hands, just to present flowers to Mukunda with deep feeling.
The scorching heat of the autumn sunshine was sometimes intolerable, and therefore the clouds in the sky appeared in sympathy above Krishna and Balaram and their boyfriends while they engaged in blowing their flutes. The clouds served as a soothing umbrella over their heads, just to make friendship with Krishna. The Aborigine girls became fully satisfied when they smeared their faces and breasts with the dust of Vrindavan, which was reddish from the touch of Krishna's lotus feet. The Aborigine girls had very full breasts, and they were also very lusty. But when their lovers touched their breasts, the girls were not very much satisfied. When they came out into the midst of the forest, they saw that while Krishna was walking, some of the leaves and the creepers of Vrindavan had turned reddish from the kumkuma powder which fell from his lotus feet. His lotus feet are held by the gopis on their breast, which are smeared with kumkuma powder. But when Krishna travels in Vrindavan forest with Balaram and his boyfriends, the reddish powder falls on the ground. So the lusty Aborigine girls while looking towards Krishna playing his flute, saw the reddish kumkuma on the ground and immediately took it and smeared it over their faces and breast. In this way, they become fully satisfied, although they were not satisfied when their lovers touched their breast. All material lusty desires can be immediately satisfied if one comes in contact with Krishna consciousness.
Another gopi began to praise the unique position of Golden Hill in this way. How fortunate is this Golden Hill, for it is enjoying the association of Lord Krishna and Balaram, who are accustomed to walking on it. Thus Golden is always in touch with the lotus feet of the Lord. And because Golden Hill is so obliged to the Lord Krishna and Balaram, it is supplying different kinds of fruits, roots and herbs, as well as pleasing crystal water from its lake. In the presentation of the Lord to the Lord, the best presentation offered by Golden Hill, however, is newly grown grass for the cows and the calves. Golden Hill knows how to please the Lord by pleasing his most beloved associate, the cows and the cowherd boys. Another gopi said, everything appears wonderful when Krishna and Balaram travel in the forest of Vrindavan, playing their flute and making intimate friendship with all kinds of moving and non-moving living creatures. When Krishna and Balaram play on their transcendental flute, the moving creature becomes stunned and stop their activities, and the non-moving living creatures like trees and plants begin to shiver with anxiety. These are the wonderful reaction to the vibration of the transcendental flute of Krishna and Balaram.
Krishna and Balarama carried binding ropes on their shoulders and in their hands, just like ordinary cowherd boys. While milking cows, cowherd boys bind the cow's hind legs with a small rope. This rope almost always hangs from the shoulders of cowherd boys, and it was not absent from the shoulders of Krishna and Balarama. In spite of their being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they played exactly like cowherd boys, and therefore everything became wonderful and attractive.
While Krishna was engaged in tending the cows in the forest of Vrindavan or on the Govardhan hill, the gopis in the village were always absorbed in thinking of him and discussing his different pastimes. This is the perfect example of Krishna consciousness, to somehow or other remain always engrossed in the thoughts of Krishna. The vivid example is always present in the behavior of the gopis. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya declared that no one can worship the Supreme Lord by any method which is better than the method of the gopis. The gopis were not born in very high Brahman or Kshatriya families. They were born in the families of Vaishyas and not in the big mercantile communities, but in the families of cowherd men. They were not very well educated, although they heard all sorts of knowledge from Brahmanas, the authorities of Vedic knowledge. The gopis' only purpose was to remain always absorbed in the thoughts of Krishna. Thus ends the Bhakti-Vedanta purport of the 21st chapter of the Krishna, the gopis attracted by the flute.
Chapter 22, Stealing the Garments of Unmarried Gopi Girls. According to Vedic civilization, unmarried girls from 10 to 14 years of age are supposed to worship either Lord Shiva or Goddess Durga in order to get a nice husband. But the unmarried girls of Vrindavan were already attracted by the beauty of Krishna. They were, however, engaged in the worship of Goddess Durga in the beginning of the Hemanta season, just prior to the winter season. The first month of Hemanta is Agrahayana, October till November, and at that time all the unmarried gopis of Vrindavan began to worship goddess Durga with a vow. They first ate havishyana, a kind of food prepared by boiling together moong dal and rice without any spices or turmeric. According to Vedic injunction, this kind of food is recommended to purify the body before one enacts a ritualistic ceremony. All the unmarried gopis in Vrindavan used to daily worship goddess Katyayani early in the morning after taking bath in the river Yamuna. Katyayani is another name for goddess Durga. The goddess is worshipped by preparing a doll made of sand from the bank of the Yamuna. It is recommended in the Vedic scriptures that deity may be made from different kinds of material elements. It is be painted, made of metal, made of jewels, made of wood, earth or stone, or can be conceived within the heart of the worshipper. The Mayavadi philosopher takes all these forms of the deity to be imaginary, but actually they are accepted in the Vedic scriptures to be identical with either the Supreme Lord or a respective demigod.
The unmarried gopis used to prepare the deity of goddess Durga and worship it with chandan pulp, garlands, incense, lamps, and all kinds of presentations, fruits, grain, and twigs of plants. After worshipping, it is the custom to pray for some benediction. The unmarried gopis used to pray with great devotion to goddess Katyayani, addressing her as follows: O supreme eternal energy of the personality of Godhead, O supreme mystic power, O supreme controller of this material world, O goddess, please be kind to us and arrange for our marriage with the son of Nanda Maharaj, Krishna. The Vaishnavas generally do not worship any demigods. Srila Narottam Das Thakur has strictly forbidden all worship of the demigods for anyone who wants to advance in pure devotional service. Yet the gopis, who are beyond compare in their affection for Krishna, were seen to worship Durga. The worshippers of demigods sometimes mention that the gopis worshipped goddess Durga, but we must understand the purpose of the gopis. Generally, people worship goddess Durga for some material benediction. Here, the gopis prayed to the goddess to become wives of Lord Krishna. The purport is that if Krishna is the center of activity, a devotee can adopt any means to achieve that goal. The gopis could adopt any means to satisfy or serve Krishna. That was the super excellent characteristic of the gopis. They worshipped goddess Durga completely for 1 month in order to have Krishna as their husband. Every day they prayed for Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj, to become their husband.
Early in the morning, the gopis used to go to the bank of the Yamuna to take a bath. They would assemble together and, holding one another's hands, loudly sing of the wonderful pastimes of Krishna. It is an old system among Indian girls and women that when they take a bath in the river, they place their garments on the bank and dip into the water completely naked. The portion of the river where the girls and women bathe was strictly prohibited to any male, and this is still the system. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, knowing the minds of the unmarried young gopis, blessed them with their desired objective. They had prayed for Krishna to become their husband, and Krishna wanted to fulfill their desires.
At the end of the month, Krishna, along with his friends, appeared on the scene. Another name of Krishna is Yogeshwara, or Master of all mystic powers. By practicing meditation, the yogi can study the psychic movement of other men, and certainly Krishna could understand the desire of the gopis. Appearing on the scene, Krishna immediately collected all the garments of the gopis, climbed up into a nearby tree, and with a smiling face began to speak to them. "My dear girls," he said, "please come here one after another and pray for your garments and then take them away. I am not joking with you. I am just telling the truth. I have no desire to play any joke with you, for you are tired from observing the regulative principles for 1 month by worshipping Goddess Katyayani. Please do not come here all at once. Come alone. I want to see each of you in your complete beauty, for you all have thin waists. I have requested you to come alone. Now please comply."
When the girls in the water heard such joking words from Krishna, they began to look at one another and smile. They were very joyous to hear such a request from Krishna because they were already in love with him. Out of shyness, out of shyness, they looked at one another, but they could not come out of the water because they were naked. Due to remaining in the water for a long time, they felt cold and were shivering. Yet upon hearing the pleasing, joking words of Govinda, their minds were perturbed with great joy. They told Krishna, "Dear son of Nanda Maharaj, please do not joke with us in that way. It is completely unjust to us. You are a very respectable boy because you are the son of Nanda Maharaj, and you are very dear to us. But you should not play this joke on us, because now we are all shivering from the cold water. Kindly deliver our garments immediately, otherwise we shall suffer." They then began to appeal to Krishna with great submission. "Dear Shyamasundar," they said, "we are all your eternal servitors. Whatever you order us to do, we are obliged to perform without hesitation, because we consider it our religious duty. But if you insist on putting this proposal to us, which is impossible to perform, then certainly we will have to go to Nanda Maharaj and lodge a complaint against you. If Nanda Maharaj does not take action, then we shall tell King Kansa about your misbehavior."
Upon hearing this appeal by the unmarried gopis, Krishna answered, "My dear girls, if you think that you are my eternal servitors and you are always ready to execute my order, then my request is that with your smiling faces, you please come here alone, one after another, and take away your garments. If you do not come here, however, and if you lodge complaints with my father, I shall not care anyway, for I know my father is old and cannot take any action against me." When the gopis saw that Krishna was strong and determined, they had no alternative but to abide by his order. One after another, they came out of the water, but because they were completely naked, they tried to cover their nakedness by placing their left hand over their pubic area. In that posture, they were all shivering. Their simple presentation was so pure that Lord Krishna immediately became pleased with them. All the unmarried gopis who prayed to Katyayani to have Krishna as their husband were thus satisfied. A woman cannot be naked before any male except her husband. The unmarried gopis desired Krishna as their husband, and he fulfilled their desires in this way. Being pleased with them, he took their garments on his shoulder and began to speak as follows: "My dear girls, You have committed a great offense by going naked in the river Yamuna. Because of this, the predominating deity of the Yamuna, Varuna Dev, has become displeased with you. Please, therefore, just touch your foreheads with folded palms. Bow down before the demigod Varuna in order to be excused from this offensive act. The gopis were all simple souls, and whatever Krishna said, they took it to be true. In order to be freed from the wrath of Varuna Deva, as well as to fulfill the desired end of their vows and ultimately to please their worshipable Lord Krishna, they immediately abided by his order. Thus they became the greatest lovers of Krishna and his most obedient servitors.
Nothing can compare with Krishna consciousness of the gopis. Actually, the gopis did not care for Varun or any other demigod. They only wanted to satisfy Krishna. Krishna became very ingrained and satisfied by simply dealing of the gopis, and he immediately delivered their respective garments one after another. Although Krishna cheated young unmarried gopis and made them stand naked before him and enjoyed joking words with them, and although he treated them just like the dolls and stole their garments, they were still pleased with him and never lodged complaint against him. This attitude of gopis is described by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he prays, "My dear Lord Krishna, you may embrace me or trample me under your feet, or you may make me broken-hearted by never being present before me. Whatever you like, you can do, because you have complete freedom to act. But in spite of all your dealing, you are my Lord eternal, and I have no other worshipable object." This is the attitude of the gopis toward Krishna.
Lord Krishna was pleased with them, and since they all decided to have him as their husband, he told them, "My dear well-behaved girls, I know of your desire for me and why you worship goddess Katyayani, and I completely approve of your action. Anyone whose full consciousness is always absorbed in me, even if in lust, is elevated. As a fried seed cannot fructify, so any desire in connection with my loving service cannot produce any fruitive result, as in ordinary karma."
There is a statement in Brahma Samhita, "Karmani nirdhati kintu cha bhakti bhajam." Everyone is bound by his fruitive activities, but the devotees, because they work completely for the satisfaction of the Lord, suffer no reactions. Similarly, the gopis' attitude toward Krishna, although seemingly lusty, should not be considered to be like the lusty desires of ordinary women. The reason is explained by Krishna himself. Activities in devotional service to Krishna are transcendental to any fruitive results. "My dear gopis," Krishna continued, "your desire to have me as your husband will be fulfilled, because it is with this desire that you worship goddess Katyayani. I promise you that during the next autumn season you shall be able to meet with me, and you shall enjoy me as your husband."
Later, Krishna, in the company of his cowherd boyfriends, took shelter of the shade of some trees and became very happy. Thus, he addressed the inhabitants of Vrindavan, "My dear Stuk Krishna, my dear Varutapa, my dear Bhadrasena, my dear Sudama, my dear Subala, my dear Arjuna, my dear Vishala, my dear Sabha. Just look at these most fortunate trees of Vrindavan. they have dedicated their lives to the welfare of others. Individually, they are tolerating all kinds of natural disturbances such as hurricanes, torrents of rains, scorching heat and piercing cold. But they are very careful to relieve our fatigue and give us shelter. My dear friends, I think they are glorified in this birth as trees. They are so careful to give shelter to others that they are like noble, highly elevated charitable men who never deny charity to one who approaches them. No one is denied shelter by these trees. They supply various kinds of facilities to human society, such as leaves, flowers, fruit, shade, roots, bark, flavor extracts, and fuel. They are the perfect example of noble life. They are like a noble person who has sacrificed everything possible, his body, mind, activities, intelligence and words, for the welfare of all living entities.
Thus, the Supreme Personality of Godhead walked on the bank of the Yamuna, touching the leaves of the trees and their fruits, flowers, and twigs, and praising their glorious welfare activities. Different people may accept certain welfare activities to be beneficial for human society according to their own views, but the welfare activity that can be rendered to people in general for eternal benefit is the spreading of the Krishna consciousness movement. Everyone should be prepared to propagate this movement. As instructed by Lord Chaitanya, one should be humbler than the grass on the ground and more tolerant than the tree. The toleration of the tree is explained by Lord Krishna himself as those who are engaged in the preaching of Krishna consciousness should learn lessons from the teachings of Lord Krishna and Lord Chaitanya through their direct disciplic succession.
While passing through the forest of Vrindavan on the bank of the Yamuna, Krishna sat down at a beautiful spot and allowed the cows to drink the cold and transparent water of the Yamuna. Being fatigued, the cowherd boys, Krishna and Balaram, also drank. After seeing the young gopis bathe in the Yamuna, Krishna passed the rest of the morning with the boys. Thus ends the Bhakti-Vedanta purport of the 22nd chapter of Krishna stealing the garments of the unmarried gopi girls.
Okay, Bhaiya. Okay. You can start with the next chapter.
Okay, Mataji. Chapter 23, delivering the wives of the Brahmanas who performed sacrifices. The morning passed, and the cowherd boys were very hungry because they had not eaten breakfast. They immediately approached Krishna and Balarama and said, "Dear Krishna and Balarama, you are both all powerful. You can kill many demons, but today we are much afflicted with hunger, and this is disturbing us. Please arrange for something that will mitigate our hunger."
Thank you. Requested in this way by their friends, Lord Krishna and Balaram arranged to show compassion to certain wives of Brahmanas who were performing sacrifices. These wives were great devotees of the Lord, and Krishna took this opportunity to bless them. He said, "My dear friends, please go to the house of the Brahmanas nearby. They are now engaged in performing the Vedic sacrifice known as Angi Rasa, for they desire elevation to the heavenly planets. All of you please go to them. Then Lord Krishna warned his friends, "These Brahmanas are not Vaishnavas. They cannot even chant our names Krishna and Balaram. They are very busy in chanting the Vedic hymns, although the purpose of Vedic knowledge is to find me. But because they are not attracted by the names of Krishna and Balaram, you had better not ask them for anything in my name. Better ask for some charity in the name of Balaram."
Charity is generally given to high-class Brahmanas, but Krishna and Balaram did not appear in a Brahmin family. Balaram was known as the son of Vasudeva, a Kshatriya, and Krishna was known in Vrindavan as the son of Nanda Maharaj, who was a Vaishya. Neither belonged to the Brahmana community. Therefore, Krishna considered that the Brahmanas engaged in performing sacrifices might not be induced to give charity to a Kshatriya and Vaishya. But at least if you utter the name of Balaram, they may prefer to give in charity to a Kshatriya rather than to me, because I am only a Vaishya.
Being thus ordered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all the boys went to the Brahmanas and began to ask for some charity. They approached them with folded hands and fell down on the ground to offer respects. "O earthly gods, kindly hear us, who are ordered by the Lord Krishna and Balaram. We hope you know them both very well, and we wish you all good fortune. Krishna and Balaram are tending cows nearby, and we have accompanied them. We have come to ask for some food from you. You are all Brahmanas and know of religious principles, and if you think that you should give us charity, then give us some food, and we shall all eat along with Krishna and Balaram. You are the most respectable Brahmanas within the human society, and you are expected to know all the principles of religious procedure." Although the boys were village boys and were not expected to be learned in all the Vedic principles of religious ritual, they hinted that because of their association with Krishna and Balaram, they knew all those principles. By addressing the Brahmanas as knowers of all religious principles, the boys expressed the point of view that when the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna and Balaram, were asking for food, the Brahmanas should immediately deliver some without hesitation, because, as stated in the Bhagavad-Gita, one should perform yajna, sacrifice, only for the satisfaction of Vishnu.
The boys continued, "Lord Vishnu as Krishna and Balaram is standing waiting, and you should immediately deliver whatever food you have in your stock." They also explained in the Brahmanas when the food is to be accepted and when it is not to be accepted. Generally, the Vaishnava or the pure devotee of the Lord do not take part in ordinary sacrifice performances, but they know very well the ceremonies called Diksha, Pasu Samartha and Sumarthamani. One is permitted to take food after the produce of Diksha and before the animal sacrifice ceremony, and the Sutramani or the ceremony in which liquor are also offered. The boy said, "We can take your food at the present stage of your ceremony, for now it will not be provided, so you can deliver us the food."
Although the companions of the Lord Krishna and Balarama were simple cowherd boys, they were in a position to dictate even to the high-class Brahmanas engaged in the Vedic rituals of sacrifice. But the smarter Brahmanas, who were simply sacrificial-minded, could not understand the dictation of the transcendental activities of the Lord. They could not even appreciate the begging of the Supreme Lord Krishna and Balarama. Although they heard all the arguments on behalf of Krishna and Balarama, they did not care for them and they refused to speak to the boys. Despite being highly elevated in the knowledge of Vedic sacrificial rites, all such non-devotee Brahmanas, although they think of themselves as very highly elevated or ignorant, foolish persons, all their activities are childish because they do not know the purpose of the Vedas. As it is explained in the Bhagavad-Gita, to understand Krishna. In spite of their advancement in Vedic knowledge and rituals, they do not understand Krishna. Therefore, their knowledge of the Veda is useless. Lord Chaitanya therefore gave his valuable opinion that although a person may not be born in a Brahmana family, he knows Krishna or the sense of Krishna consciousness. He is more than a Brahmana and he is quite fit to become a spiritual master.
There are various details to be observed in the performance of sacrifices. They are known as Desh, place, Kala, time, Prathak, Dravya, the different detailed paraphernalia, mantra, hymns, tantra, scriptural evidences, Agni, fire, Ritvik, learned performers of sacrifices, Devta, the demigods, Yajman, the performer of the sacrifices, Kratu, the sacrifice itself, and Dharma, the procedures. All these are for satisfying Krishna. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad-Gita that he is the actual enjoyer of all sacrifices because he is directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Supreme Absolute Truth, beyond the conception of speculation of the material senses. He is present just like an ordinary human boy, but for the persons who identify themselves with the body, it is very difficult to understand him. The Brahmanas very much interested in the comforts of the material body and in elevation to the higher planetary residences called Svargavas. They were therefore completely unable to understand the position of Krishna.
When the boys saw that the Brahmanas would not reply to them even with the simple yes or no, they became very much disappointed. They then returned to Lord Krishna and Balaram and explained everything that had happened. After hearing their statements, the Supreme Personality of Godhead smiled. He told them that they should not be sorry for being refused by the Brahmanas, because that is the way of begging. He convinced them that one who is engaged in collecting or begging should not think that he will be successful everywhere. He may be unsuccessful in some places, but that should not be case for disappointment. Lord Krishna then asked all the boys to go again, but this time to the wives of those Brahmanas engaged in sacrifices. He also informed them that these wives were great devotees. They were always absorbed in thinking of us. Go there and ask for some food in my name and the name of Balram, and I am sure that they will deliver you as much food as you desire.
Carrying out Krishna's order, the boys immediately went to the wives of the Brahmanas. They found the wives sitting inside the Brahmana's house. They were very beautifully decorated with ornaments. After offering them all respectful obeisances, the boys said, "Dear mothers, please accept our humble obeisances and hear our statement. May we inform you that Lord Krishna and Balaram are nearby. They have come here with the cows, and you may know also that we have come here under their instructions. All of us are very hungry Therefore, we have come to you for some food. Please give us something to eat for Krishna, Balaram, and ourselves.
The wives of the Brahmanas became anxious for Krishna and Balarama. These reactions were spontaneous. They did not have to be convinced of the importance of Krishna and Balarama. Immediately, upon hearing their names, they became very eager to see them. Being advanced by thinking of Krishna constantly, they were performing the greatest form of mystic meditation. All the wives then became very busily engaged in filling up different pots with nice food. Due to the performance of the sacrifice, the various foods were all very palatable. After collecting a feast, they prepared to go to Krishna, their most beloved object, exactly in the way rivers flow to the sea.
For Krishna. However, when they were preparing to leave home to go see him, their husbands, fathers, sons, and relatives asked them not to go, but the wives did not comply. When a devotee is called by the attraction of Krishna, he does not care for bodily ties. The woman entered the forest of Vrindavan on the banks of Yamuna, which was verdant with vegetation and newly grown vines and flowers. Within that forest, they saw Krishna and Balaram engaged in tending the cows along with their very affectionate boyfriends. May I continue? The Brahmana's wives saw Krishna with a blackish complexion, wearing a garment that glittered like gold. He wore a nice garland of forest flowers and a peacock feather on his head. He was also painted with the minerals found in Vrindavan, and he looked exactly like a dancing actor on a theatrical stage. They saw him resting one hand on the shoulder of his friend, and in his other hand he was holding a lotus flower. His ears were decorated with lilies. He wore marks of tilak, and he was smiling charmingly. With their very eyes, the wives of the Brahmanas saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, of whom they had heard so much, who was so dear to them, and in whom their minds were always absorbed. Now they saw him eye to eye and face to face, and Krishna entered within their hearts through their eyes.
Within themselves, they began to embrace Krishna to their heart's content, and the distress of separation was mitigated immediately. They were just like great sages who, by their advancement of knowledge, merge into the existence of the Supreme. As a supersoul living in everyone's heart, Lord Krishna could understand their minds. They had come to him despite all the protests of their relatives, fathers, husbands, and brothers, and despite all the duties of household affairs. They came just to see him, who was their life and soul. They were exactly following Krishna's instruction in the Bhagavad-Gita. One should surrender to him, giving up all varieties of occupation and religious duties. He therefore began to speak to them, smiling very magnificently. It should be noted in this connection that when Krishna entered into the wives' hearts, and when they embraced him and felt the transcendental bliss of being merged with him, the Supreme Lord Krishna did not lose his identity, nor did the individual wives lose theirs. The individuality of both the Lord and the wives remained, yet they felt oneness in existence. When a lover submits to his lover without any pinch of personal consideration, that is called oneness. Lord Chaitanya has taught us this feeling of oneness in his Shikshashtaka. Krishna may act freely, doing whatever he likes, but the devotee should always be in oneness or in agreement with his desires. That oneness was exhibited by the wives of the Brahmanas in their love for Krishna.
Krishna welcomed them with the following words: My dear wives of the Brahmanas, you are very fortunate and are welcome here. Please let me know what I can do for you. You are coming here to see me, neglecting all the restrictions and the hindrance of relatives, fathers, brothers, and husbands is completely befitting. One who does this actually knows his self-interest, because rendering transcendental loving service unto me without motive or restriction is actually auspicious for the living entities.
Lord Krishna here confiding to him, one must give up all other responsibility. This complete surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the most auspicious path for the conditioned soul, because the Supreme Lord is the supreme object of love. Everyone is loving his self accordingly to the advancement of his knowledge. Ultimately, when a person comes to understand that his self is the spirit soul, and that spirit soul is nothing but part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, he recognizes the Supreme Lord as the ultimate goal of love and then surrender unto him. This surrender is considered auspicious for the conditioned soul. Our life, property, home, wife, children, house, country, society, and all paraphernalia, which are very dear to us, are expression of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is central object of love, because he gives us all bliss, expanding himself in so many ways according to our different situation, namely body, mental or spiritual.
My dear wives of the Brahmanas, Krishna said, you can now return to your homes. Engage yourselves in sacrificial activities and in the service of your husbands and household affairs, so that your husbands will be pleased with you, and the sacrifice which they have begun will be properly executed. After all, your husbands are householders, and without your help, how can they execute their prescribed duties?
The wives of the Brahmanas replied, Dear Lord, this sort of instructions does not befit you. Your eternal promise is that you will always protect your devotees, and now you must fulfill this promise. Anyone who comes and surrenders unto you never goes back to the conditioned life of material existence. We expect that you will now fulfill your promise. We have surrendered unto your lotus feet, which are covered by tulsi leaves, so we have no desire to give up the shelter of your lotus feet and return to the company of our so-called relatives, friends, and society. And what shall we do if we return home? Our husbands, brothers, fathers, sons, mothers, and friends will no longer accept us at the home because we have already left them all. Therefore, we have no shelter to return to. Please, therefore, do not ask us to return home, but arrange for our stay under your lotus feet so that we can eternally live under your protection.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead replied, My dear wives of the Brahmanas, rest assured that your husbands will not neglect you on your return, nor will your brothers, sons or fathers refuse to accept you. Because you are my pure devotees, not only your relatives but also people in general, as well as the demigods, will be satisfied with you. Krishna is situated as the super soul in everyone's heart. So someone who becomes a pure devotee of Lord Krishna immediately becomes pleasing to everyone. The pure devotee of Lord Krishna is never inimical to anyone, nor can any sane person be an enemy of a pure devotee. Transcendental love for me does not depend upon bodily connection. Krishna said further, but anyone whose mind is always absorbed in me will surely very soon come to me for my eternal association.
After being instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all the wives returned home to their respective husbands. Pleased to see their wives back home, the Brahmanas sat together with them and executed the performances of sacrifices as enjoined in the Shastras. According to Vedic principle, religious rituals must be executed by the husband and wife together. When the Brahmanas' wives returned, the sacrifice was duly and nicely executed. One of the Brahmanas' wives, however, who had been forcibly checked from going to see Krishna, began to remember him as she heard of his bodily features. Being completely absorbed in his thought, she gave up her material body conditioned by the laws of nature. After the departure of the Brahmanas' wives, Sri Govinda and his cowherd boyfriends enjoyed the food they had offered. In this way, the ever-joyful personality of Godhead exhibited his transcendental pastimes in the guise of an ordinary human being in order to attract the common people to Krishna consciousness. With his words and beauty, he attracted all the cows, cowherd boys, and damsels in Vrindavan. All of them together enjoyed the pastimes of the Lord.
After the return of their wives from Krishna, the Brahmanas engaged in the performance of sacrifices began to regret their sinful activities in refusing food to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They could finally understand their mistake. Engaged in the performance of Vedic rituals, they had neglected the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who had appeared just like an ordinary human being and asked for some food. They began to condemn themselves after seeing the faith and devotion of their wives. They regretted very much that although their wives were elevated to the platform of pure devotional service, they themselves could not understand even a little bit of how to love and offer transcendental loving service to the Supreme Soul. They began to talk among themselves. To hell with our being born Brahmanas. To hell with our learning all the Vedic literatures. To hell with our performing great sacrifices and observing all the rules and regulations. To hell with our family. To hell with our expert services in performing the rituals exactly according to the descriptions of the scriptures. To hell with it all, for we have not developed transcendental loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is beyond the speculation of the mind, body, and senses.
Okay. The learned Brahmanas, expert in Vedic ritualistic performances, were properly regretful because if one does not develop Krishna consciousness, all discharge of religious duties is simply a waste of time and energy. They continue to talk among themselves. The external energy of Krishna is so strong that it can create illusion to overcome the greatest mystic yogi. Although we expert Brahmanas are considered to be the teachers of all other sections of human society, we also have been illusioned by the external energy. Just see how fortunate these women are. They have so devotedly dedicated their lives to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna that they could easily do what is ordinarily so difficult. They gave up their family connections, which are just like a dark well for the continuation of material miseries. Women in general, being very simple at heart, can very easily take to Krishna consciousness, and when they develop love of Krishna, they can easily get liberation from the clutches of Maya, which are very difficult for even so-called intelligent and learned men to surpass.
Yeah. The Brahmanas continued. According to Vedic injunction, women are not allowed to undergo the purificatory process of initiation by the sacred thread, nor are they allowed to live as brahmacharinis in the ashram of the spiritual master, nor are they advised to undergo the strict disciplinary procedures, nor are they very expert in discussing the philosophy of self-realization. And by nature they are not very pure, nor are they very much attached to auspicious activities. Therefore, how wonderful it is that these women have developed transcendental love for Krishna, the Lord of all mystic yogis. They have surpassed all of us in firm faith and devotion unto Krishna. Although we are considered to be masters in all purificatory processes, we did not actually know what their goal is because we are too much attached to the materialistic way of life. Even though we are reminded of Krishna and Balaram by the cowherd boys, we disregarded them. We now think that the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply played a trick of mercy on us by sending his friends to beg food from us. Otherwise, he had no need to send them. He could have satisfied their hunger then and there just by willing to do so.
If someone denies Krishna's self-sufficiency on hearing that he was tending the cows for his livelihood, or if someone doubts his not being in need of the food, thinking that he was actually hungry, then such a person should understand that the goddess of fortune is always engaged in service. In this way, the goddess can break her faulty habits of restlessness. In Vedic literature, like the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that Krishna is served in his abode with great respect by not only one goddess of fortune, but many thousands. Therefore, it is simply illusion for one to think that Krishna begged food from the Brahmanas. It was actually a trick to show them mercy by teaching them that they should accept him in pure devotional service instead of engaging in ritualistic ceremonies. The Vedic ceremonial paraphernalia, the suitable place, the suitable time, the different grades of articles for performing the ritualistic ceremonies, the Vedic hymns, the process of sacrifice, the priest who is able to perform the sacrifice, the fire, the demigods, the performer of the sacrifice, religious principles are all meant for understanding Krishna. For Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the Supreme Lord Vishnu and the Lord of all mystic yogis.
Because he has appeared as a child in the dynasty of Yadu, we were so foolish that we could not understand that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Brahmana said, but on the other hand, we are very proud because we have such excellent wives who have developed pure transcendental service to the Lord without being slacked by our rigid opposition. Let us therefore offer our respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, under whose illusion energy called Maya we are absorbed in the fruitive activities. We therefore pray to the Lord to be kind enough to excuse us because we are simply captivated by his external energy. We transgress his order without knowing his transcendent glories.
The Brahmanas repented their sinful activities. They wanted to go personally to offer their obeisances unto him, but being afraid of Kamsa, they could not go to Krishna and surrender unto him. In other words, it is very difficult for one to surrender fully unto the personality of Godhead without being purified by devotional service. The example of the learned Brahmanas and their wives is vivid. The wives of the Brahmanas, because they were inspired by pure devotional service, did not care for any kind of opposition. They immediately went to Krishna, but the Brahmanas, although they had come to know the supremacy of the Lord and were repenting, were still afraid of King Kamsa because they were too much addicted to fruitive activities. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 23rd chapter of Krishna, delivering the wives of the Brahmanas who performed sacrifices. Hari Bol.
So that concludes our hourly reading of Krishna book to Srila Prabhupada. And as we always do, let us offer respectful obeisances to Srila Prabhupada and to each other. Namo Om Vishnuvadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti-Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Paskachadi Shatarane. And to each other, Vancha Kalpatubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Krishna Book, Jai Shri Gauda Bhakta Vrinda. See you next week, same time. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.